So I was there. I was there for like 9 hours. It's like the capitalist dream to just have like the place that you never have to leave, and you can get every amenity.
And it's Cardigan Fields.
Have you sent me the doc? Yes, you have.
Yes. China happened.
China happened. Okay.
China happened.
Should we get into it?
Yeah, just drag me through, Charlie. Drag me through.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Top Step. We're back in our rightful home at The Top Step, which is why this is called The Top Step.
Yes.
And the Corridor of Uncertainty. But you all knew that already. What else is there to address? Johnny's very tired. He's had an early today.
This is going to be a tough one, I think, for me. I'm going to stumble through. I've been saying to Charlie beforehand that he might need to guide me through because, I got up at 3 in the morning. We were just saying that actually 3 till it's 4 o'clock as we record this is fairly normal, but I didn't really sleep fantastically well. So I think it's going to be an interesting one to see if I can A, stay awake, and B, formulate cohesive sentences. So
absolutely,
we'll
and I haven't read the doc, so this could all be go
a
very
muddled
wrong.
one.
I also need to leave for work in like 45 minutes, so this would be slightly truncated.
No pressure.
To be fair, we probably waffle on a little bit longer than we need to anyway, so I'm sure that'll be absolutely fine. In terms of the race, there wasn't, it was a really interesting race, but obviously I think we're still kind of where we expect to be with these new cars and these new regulations with who is sort of coming to the fore. But one thing that slightly surprised us is that Kimi Antonelli was actually the victor of this race rather than George Russell. To honour him, I have worn my Inter Milan.
Is that why you've done that?
Top. I have.
Nice.
It was already in being considered for the wear, but I thought, you know what, it kind of makes a little bit of sense because he's Italian. I actually Googled who he supports. He supports Bologna. So this is probably a spit in the face of Kimi Antonelli, and I apologise. But yeah, he won. He's announced his little self, as you've put down here.
He's a small man.
Is he ready for the fight?
Is he ready for the fight? I mean, I think there's two
You've
ways.
written the question down. I like how you sound so. You're like, oh yeah.
It's a really good question. It's a really good question. That. Is he ready for the fight? I think there's two ways of looking at it because on the one hand, he drove superbly well. And, we'll get into George Russell's race, but Kimi was on pole position. He did lose the lead at the start briefly, but he didn't get swallowed up like George Russell did. And then he got back past. He did everything that he needed to do. He stretched his legs, and the way the race shook out with Russell slipping back behind the Ferraris when the safety car came out, and then Kimi was quite far in front because there were some lap cars in between them, which allowed Kimi to kind of steal a march on George, so that by the time he got past the Ferraris, which took a while actually, he had a nice sort of 8-9 second cushion. And as we hear screams from the outdoors, it's a lovely day today, so people are just running around screaming. And he had that buffer, he had that margin. And the question was he going to make a mistake? And he nearly did. He locked up and went wide and lost a few seconds, but he already had enough of a buffer. And in terms of pace, they looked pretty even. Russell was only catching him by a very small amount. So, yeah, Kimi did all he needed to do. Is he ready for the fight? He's shown that he's up for it. But we have to look at the context of George Russell, I think, when discussing this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think he'll feel about the result? Obviously, P1 in the sprint race and then won that, and then P2 here, which, I mean, considering how his qualifying or his Q3 at least was panning out, it's actually, a minor miracle that he managed to get himself on that front row. But, in terms of the race, I'll be honest, I thought that P2 was probably going to be enough for Russell to secure the win. I thought, he's obviously got in the same car with the same race pace as Kimi, and I thought, given how imperious he's looked at the start of this season and Antonelli's relative inexperience, I just assumed that Russell would pass Antonelli at some point. So how did you feel about the result, and how did the race unravel to the point where he was no chance of catching Kimi?
I agree with pretty much everything you just said, Charlie. I think you put it very well. I think if you look at where George Russell was about 2 minutes into the third part of qualifying, and you just said to him, you'll qualify second, maybe he wouldn't be so happy that he'd finished second after qualifying second, but just that the result would be that he would still be on the front row and just in behind his teammate. I think he'd have been pretty much okay with that, because it was looking at one stage that he wasn't even going to be able to put a lap on the board, that he would have been 10th. And yeah, if he starts 10th, you'd probably still back him to get on the podium at least and not lose too many points. But yeah, it could have been a lot worse for George Russell. But I completely agree with you. I feel like when I saw that Russell popped in a time to go second, which, by the way, just one lap at the end of qualifying to still put it second is pretty good going, even in that dominant car, after no sort of getting your eye in that final part of qualifying. I assumed that he'd get past Kimi as well. And I think he probably would have done if a couple of things didn't happen. A, the Ferrari's getting past at the start. I think Hamilton got past Kimi Antonelli, but Leclerc didn't, which means that he didn't fall, Kimi didn't fall into the clutches of George. And then crucially, when Russell got past those two Ferraris, he ended up back behind them under the safety car with lap cars, in behind him. So I think there were circumstances that affected George's race, circumstances that my assumption is if they didn't happen, he probably would have found a way to get through. But it's not a terrible result for him. The sprint, of course, went really well. He won that. Kimi Antonelli had a really difficult sprint. He was getting into some fights that he probably shouldn't have been in, sticking his nose in. He got a penalty, which dropped him back down to 5th. So in a way, that sprint kind of saved George, and he still leads the championship. But I think he'll feel okay with how the weekend's gone. But it's just a little bit of a nudge to say, hey, I'm Kimi Antonelli. I've got a chance here.
I've got a two-part question for you following on from that, really. Number one, as we've got written down here, do we have a title fight on our hands? As you say, George still has his nose out in front because of the more, consistent couple of weekends overall. But you talk about, the circumstances at play and how they're not always going to be a factor. Absolutely, a safety car is not guaranteed to be a factor in every race. In fact, we know that there won't be a safety car every race. One thing that looks like it's not going anywhere there, though, is that Ferrari start. Again, they've raced to the front of the pack right from the first corner. And it's a really interesting dynamic early on in this season because, we know that Mercedes are by far the quickest car. And if they just manage to get themselves comfortably out of the starting paddock, off the starting line, then they'd probably, win comfortably. But Ferrari, this start has given them a real headache, isn't it?
It's like a mini reverse grid race at the start between those two. And it makes it more exciting. Obviously, having the quicker cars shuffled behind cars that are, still quick and still have a chance of being sort of thorns in the side. That's how I describe Ferrari at the moment, thorns in the side. I don't think they're able to quite outright challenge them, certainly not on qualifying pace, certainly not on pure race pace, but just that start, as you say, is electric for the Ferraris. An interesting thing that's kind of going on behind the scenes at the moment is that it turns out that last year, Fred Vasseur, who is the team principal at Ferrari, went to the FIA and said, there's going to be problems with the start. Getting these off the line and fully charged is going to be an issue. You might want to rethink these rules. And the FIA said, no, you should build the car to the rules, which Ferrari have done, got a brilliant start, and now all the other teams are lobbying the FIA to make changes to the start, to which Ferrari are saying, well, no, you've told us to build a car to the rules, we've done it, and now you can't just turn around and change the rules around. Obviously, there's a little bit of hypocrisy maybe from the Mercedes camp. They've been saying that, Ferrari are being selfish and blocking it, but Mercedes very much tried to block the compression ratio thing. So I just think it's part of the games of F1. That's kind of how it goes. And for me personally, I absolutely get Ferrari's position. There is an argument that it's dangerous and that there was an onboard that I saw from Australia, possibly after we did the podcast, where it was Colapinto avoiding Lawson getting a really bad start, and the closing speed and the reactions were unbelievable to avoid the crash, and we could see a crash at some point. But if you're Ferrari, you've been told, build a car to the regulations. Okay, we've done that. Now you're changing them. So I completely get where Ferrari are coming from, and I want them to stay like this because it means we get the slower car in front and we get a race on our hands, as we saw in China. Absolutely.
We'll continue to talk about Ferrari right now, but just one word answer, is there a title fight on between Antonelli and Russell?
Forgot that question. I can't do it. Okay, I'll give you one word. Okay. Rosberg. And, okay. and to explain that slightly is that...
Yes, do more words as I'm just going to close the window in the bathroom.
Yes,
it's rattling.
It is a rattly boy. as I lean across to allow all the light shines through. Yes, so Nico Rosberg in 2016, when he beat Lewis Hamilton in equal machinery, did so by whenever Hamilton was winning, he finished second every time. And whenever Hamilton hit bad luck or had an off day, or his engine conked out, or he had a poor qualifying, or whatever it might be, he won every time and maximised. And the thing with a title where you're expecting the same team to finish 1-2 every race, you know, 7 points between first and second, 7, 14, 20, so 21 points, let's say, three races, you've won 3 races in a row, you DNF the next race, the other guy wins, which he probably will, he's in a Mercedes, dominant car, and you're behind him again. And that's the way I think Kimi Antonelli can win this championship. When Russell has an off day, win the race. Every other time, finish second and hope that you get a bit of luck. So can he do it? Yes. I would say 7 times I'd back Russell, 3 times Antonelli in terms of that actually panning out. But there's a chance.
Absolutely. And I think especially something that's become clear to me in these first couple of races with the regulation changes is obviously with there being such a big disparity in between the quality of each team's car, these intra-team battles become all the more important to have an exciting season, because you're not going to get the Max versus 2 McLarens kind of thing happening this year. So it comes down to these battles between teammates, and we've certainly got another one on our hands in Leclerc and Hamilton. Just absolutely thrilling racing in this one. The highlight of the race, just trading places back and forward for ages. You know, both being really, you know, racing fair, but racing aggressively, and they both really seem to enjoy it themselves too.
They did, yeah. Leclerc came over the radio despite kind of losing out in that battle and said, actually, to be fair, that was quite a fun battle, which is nice to hear. It's nice to hear, you know, drivers enjoying and relishing that prospect. And those two came so close to touching, and they were going wheel to wheel through, you know, multiple corners, almost half the lap at one point. They stayed side by side, and that's what we want to see. That's fantastic. And they kept it clean, they kept it fair, they enjoyed it. And it's nice to see Lewis Hamilton get a bit closer to Leclerc, and actually he beat him in the Chinese Grand Prix this weekend. And we didn't see, I mean, last year, we didn't really see that much. And we'll get on to the next question. Is Hamilton back? I've sort of stolen your thunder there, Charlie, and led myself onto it. My apologies. There was one race last year where Hamilton seemed to have Leclerc in his back pocket, and that was China. So I think great to see Hamilton fighting up there with him. He was closer in Australia, which leads me to believe that he is just generally closer with these regulations. He enjoys driving them. I think Hamilton's always been a driver that likes to carry a bit more speed into the corner, be late on the brakes and sort it out. And I think that the last regulations didn't really suit itself to that driving style. Maybe these ones do. And hopefully we do see him a lot closer. I would just say this has always been a weak track for Leclerc, and it's always been a strong track for Hamilton. But if he's, you know, in there and creating great battles, we kind of need him to be there and fighting Leclerc to make a fun battle if we expect the Ferraris to go ahead of Mercedes at the start and then be passed pretty soon after that. But it's just, I mean, I'm not the biggest Hamilton fan, but Formula One's better when he's at the front racing and feeling good about himself. So long may it continue. Absolutely.
Was it the Chinese sprint that he won last year? Yeah, that's the one thing that he's won for Ferrari.
And now he's got his first podium at the same track.
Yeah, so as you say, that might just mean that he's a bit of a... I mean, you can't... a one-track pony, I was going to say, but obviously he's won everywhere in his career. Yeah. This was his 10th podium in China, though, so it's clearly one that he likes quite a lot. I think, I am a big Hamilton fan. I really enjoy him, but, one thing that you could say about Hamilton, which I think, you would make the argument that actually means that there are probably, certain guys in front of him in the all-time great list, has been the fact that there's been quite a few times during his career when he hasn't really dominated his teammate, but that's actually just led to some incredibly exciting F1, be it Alonso, be it Button, be it Rosberg or Russell, and now Leclerc. I mean, with the exception of Valtteri Bottas, who took races off him here and there, but was clearly there to be his backup. Yeah. I think Hamilton consistently throughout his career has produced like really good battles with his teammates. So I really hope personally, even though I like him and I'd probably like to see him win out over Leclerc over the course of the season. I do want it to be close, and it's been probably the highlight of the season so far. That being said, will Ferrari win any races this year? I'm glad you've got this down, because I was thinking this as well. Like, can you foresee a circumstance where the Mercedes finish but don't win?
That's the question. I think it depends which route you want to go down. Can Ferrari win races this year? Yes. If the Mercedes collide, if the Mercedes hit reliability problems, then obviously they're the second best team. They're the second fastest car with two very strong drivers who seem to be in good form. They would be hot favourites to take that win off them. It's just whether they can actually genuinely beat Mercedes on pace, which at the moment looks unlikely. But there are several things that could change that. So the first one would be when the new compression ratio rules come in at the halfway point of the season. I think that's happening in June or July, which they're going to test rather than at an ambient temperature. They're going to test it at I think a hot or a race-ready temperature, which might make a difference.
And they've actually said a degrees Celsius this time, I believe. I don't know what it is, but I think
I'm
they've
not
actually
sure what it
named
is.
a number instead of just saying some vague term.
Yes, that doesn't mean anything. That might make a change, but I imagine, to be honest, that Mercedes will probably find a way to not lose too much time around that. But the other thing is that there are more upgrades available depending on how far down you are. And it's not based on championship position or even points. It's based on time deficit. So what might actually help Ferrari here is that they're still quite a long way off. And I think the threshold is about 5 or 6 tenths. I might be making that up, but I think it's something like that they are off in pure pace, which they are at the moment. They will get to use let's say a token, I think is the way it's been kind of seen. Cash in a token to make improvement and bring upgrades to the power unit. And if they can do that and they can maintain their great starting off the line ability and then have a bit of pace, we know one thing we do know, they can get ahead of Mercedes. They are going to find themselves in positions at most races where they're out front. And if they have the genuine pace, they will win the race. They've just got to find that pace. Can they do it? Yeah. Will they do it? We'll find out.
Well, it's going to be very interesting, that's for sure. And it looks right now like we really need Ferrari to be competitive with Mercedes, because the two of the big four are just absolutely nowhere. Well, let's start with McLaren. What the hell happened this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that this is the team that dominated the last two Constructors' Championships, should have won the drivers 2 years ago, just about got it done last year. By far the dominant car over the last couple of seasons. And what a terrible start it's been for them. Oscar Piastri, of course, did not start, is his only finish so far, which isn't really a finish. So it's, don't know what you call that, because obviously in Australia he crashed on the way to the grid, and here he had power unit issues, as did Lando Norris. So 2 DNSs for McLaren, didn't even get to start the race. This is what we expected from Aston Martin, who we'll get onto later, but they've actually started both races, which ridiculously is quite good for them. McLaren, it's just hard to know what's going wrong. Clearly there's a lot of reliability gremlins in that car. They're struggling to get laps on the board. The actual pace, I mean, we saw that Lando Norris in Australia was a really interesting case study, actually, because Max Verstappen started in 20th and finished the race right behind him, but couldn't get past him. So it seems there is some pace that Norris maybe discovered late on in that car, but it remains to be. We have no way of knowing from China, really, because their sprint was relatively underwhelming as well. So they need to get laps on the board. They need to find some reliability. The dominant team from the last couple of seasons, they look a shadow of their former self.
Yeah, it sounds like it was 2 completely separate issues as well, which stopped them both, which I don't know if that's better or worse, really.
I think that's quite worrying, because if it's the same issue, you go, well, we'll look into that and we'll fix it on both cars for next time out. But if it's 2 different issues, that suggests that becomes 4 different issues in a way, because you've got 2 different issues on 2 different cars, which means the other could happen on the other car and you can sort of swap them over. So there's a lot of soul searching and actual data searching as well for McLaren to do to work out what those issues are. I think it's probably worse that it's 2 different issues, and it's a worrying start. Luckily for them, long way to go in the season, and they are probably, I mean, it's hard to know which is the faster car out of the Red Bull or the McLaren. China would suggest that actually McLaren, if they can get the car running, will be able to probably beat Red Bull if things stay the way they are.
Yeah, onto Red Bull. Yeah. It's weird because, you know, a retirement from Max Verstappen, as you say, we're just in that part of the season and the regs where that's going to happen from time to time. But, you know, that was just kind of the final. That was just Max being kicked while he was down more than anything. He was running down in eighth, was it, at the time of his retirement?
I think he was, seventh or eighth, something like that.
Yeah, so it had already been a really difficult weekend for him on so many fronts. So just, run us through his tough weekend. Obviously, I'm sure you're devastated. And what's going on with him and Red Bull? It's
really tough to see. I mean, in the sprint, just no pace. There was not really any extenuating, is that word? What's the word I'm looking for? External circumstances or mitigating. I'm just making words up now. There weren't any mitigating circumstances in the sprint. The Red Bull in sprint qualifying and in the sprint itself just didn't have the pace. Obviously the start was bad and we saw that again in the race. So to kind of run through Max's Sunday, qualified in seventh, and just a little bit of a shout out for Isaac Hadjar here. The fact that this is good shows just how dominant Max has been over his teammates. But he qualified within a tenth of Max Verstappen. Hats off to him. That's a fantastic performance. So he slotted in just behind him. I think they've qualified seventh and eighth. From seventh and eighth, they both had horrendous starts. Max's was awful, and he slipped to the back. I think he went back down to 19th.
Yeah, they showed a replay of just cars flooding by,
and you can see his head. He's looking like that, just like trying to avoid them all.
It's a real Lightning McQueen in Cars 3 moment.
It really was.
So when you're goat washed kind of thing.
Exactly. So he's just looking around at everyone going past him. And then we saw him start to mount a fight back, and you're thinking, is this going to be one of Max's great drives? And he fights his way back to, I think he got up to about 9th the first time around, and then Red Bull decided to bring him in and make a strategy call to try and undercut the cars in front. He comes into the pits, comes out, bang, safety car. Which obviously, as we discussed in our last episode, gives the entire field a chance to have a free pit stop, but not Max, because he just pitted, so he lost all the race time, about 22 seconds to pit, whereas everyone else probably lost about 8 to 10 seconds under the safety car, which set him right back to the back of the grid again. I think he fell back down to the lower teens, maybe even back down towards P20, and then he fought back again, and you're thinking, is this going to be another great Max Verstappen drive? And he got back up to, I think it was 7th he was running in, and then he got behind the Haas of Ollie Behrman and kind of just stayed there. And he came over the radio saying, "Look, this is all I've got. Like this, I can't get past him. I can't pass the Haas." And it was ridiculous to see. And in all likelihood, he probably would have finished where he was, 7th, 8th. And then, as you said, to kind of rub salt into the wounds, after making him go to the back, fight again through, the Red Bull Giampiero Lambiase came over the radio and said, "Max, retire the car, please." Which, to be honest, I can't imagine he was too disappointed about doing, because by the sounds of it, he despises driving this car at the moment. He hates the regs, and he went on a bit of a tirade afterwards saying, "This isn't racing." And I think his words were, those of you who feel like this is Formula One don't understand Formula One. It was a really cutting comment, a classic Max, just straight to the point. This is how I feel. How do I feel like that? I'm a massive Max Verstappen fan, but I agree and I disagree, because on the one hand, it feels like a lot of overtakes are quite cheap at the moment. It does feel like cars are passing and it doesn't mean much because they're getting repassed. On the other hand, though, look at that Ferrari battle. If that's not racing, I don't know what is. So, I would say as well, Max has been complaining about Formula One for a while. Even when he was winning, he was saying things like this, not on this level. I think he's genuinely just gradually getting more and more disillusioned with the sport, and it worries me, because I can see a situation where he's not around in 5 years' time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's made no bones about that throughout his entire career, really, and I do want to have yet another sort of existential conversation about the regs at the end of this episode, because it feels like we're just going to be doing that
all season,
every week, and I think, and you know, everyone who we've discussed so far has differing views, which you probably wouldn't surprise you considering, you know, where everyone is. But I think while we're in the midfield with Max Verstappen, which is crazy to say,
the Red Bull, they're a midfield team.
Yeah, they are.
He's a midfield driver at the moment. It's ridiculous to say that.
So obviously for him to be in the midfield is a massive disappointment, but for others to be there is a big accomplishment. And 3 standouts we've got written down here are Ollie Behrman, Pierre Gasly, and then Carlos Sainz, who, I mean, for them to be in the midfield is incredible, really.
Yeah.
Why have you got these 3 gentlemen singled out, and what would you like to say about them?
Well, Ollie Behrman was a Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc crash away from getting his first podium in the Chinese Grand Prix, and it looked like that could happen at various stages throughout the race. But to finish in 5th place, and that's pretty much on merit. I mean, we have to consider the fact that the McLarens didn't start the race, and you would assume that one or probably both of them are going to slot into that gap. There's quite a hefty gap between Leclerc and Behrman. They finished about 20 seconds apart. But still, to finish 5th for Ollie Behrman, head of the midfield, best of the rest, on pure pace, beating the Red Bull of Isaac Hadjar, looking like he was going to hold on from the other Red Bull of Max Verstappen. We don't know what was going to happen there. Max was sitting at about a second behind him every lap. But he didn't seem to be actually able to make a move. So he may well have held on and genuinely finished in 5th, which I'm not taking this away from him. He genuinely finished in 5th. That's an incredible performance. Pierre Gasly just behind him in 6th. I thought that this Haas versus Alpine battle was going to be the battle for the midfield, the best of the rest in the midfield. And in the first race in Australia, we were quite disappointed by Alpine's performance. But you know for a fact that as soon as that car gets itself sorted, Pierre Gasly is going to get the most out of it. He's an absolutely class operator in the midfield, and was, you know, ever since his Red Bull stint, has really rebuilt his career into being extremely dependable and just extracting everything out of that Alpine, and can be really happy with this 6th place. And it seems a bit of a shame to gloss over Liam Lawson in the Racing Bull, because he, seemingly the Racing Bull car, as it always seems to be in recent years, is more benign and easier to drive than the Red Bull once again. And he finished 7 seconds ahead of Hadjar, genuinely. But I think to try and limit it to 3 standouts, Carlos Sainz in that Williams, finishing in 9th place. The Williams that didn't turn up to the first test in Barcelona, looked pretty sluggish throughout testing and throughout the last Grand Prix, and never really threatened the points, to just kind of spawn in 9th place.
Yeah, and Alex Albon didn't even start this race.
Yeah, exactly. So they're clearly having massive problems. So really fair play. And Sainz was sort of like sneakily towards the end of last year one of the standout performers. He got 2 podiums in the Williams last year. And, it's, again, as soon as that car has any pace, he's going to unlock it. And also a shout out to Franco Colapinto. It's been a long time since he's been in the points. I think it's his first points for Alpine, so fair play to him. But you'd expect him to beat the Cadillacs. Lindblad probably had an off day, and then it's just a battle between him and Hülkenberg to get that last point. So maybe with the pace of the Alpine, you'd expect it, but still fair play. You got to go and deliver, and he did. But my 3 standouts: Behrman, Gasly, Sainz. Great weekends for them.
And dropping down out of the midfield into one of the many people who did not finish. Obviously, quite a few didn't start. But again, to narrow it down slightly, because I need to go soon. But I think... Sorry, my dad just texted me about the dog.
Is the dog okay? If it's, I hope it's not bad news. We don't want to do that. Maybe we should leave that.
He's not dead.
Okay,
he's
that's
not
good.
Dead
that's
yet.
Good news.
So anyway, sorry, just slightly off track there. Alonso on the straights. I don't really know what this means, so could you enlighten me, please?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of humorous moments. Well, one of them was humorous. The other one was actually quite just sad, to be honest. Was that we've heard about the nerve damage comments that the Aston Martin can't be driven around for around 20 laps before drivers get irreversible nerve damage, I think was the wording used by Adrian Newey, which is not what you want from a Formula 1 car. And so it proved. We saw Fernando Alonso with 2 incidents on the straight. The first one, him taking his hands off the wheel and stretching them out as the car was kind of going down this, and we saw the steering wheel just with his hands off it, was just shaking on the straight, and the vibrations going through that car are unbelievable. And it just makes you think how uncomfortable it must be to not just drive the thing and wrestle it around the corners, but also to just keep it in a straight line seemed like real effort. And he's having to stretch his hands and like put them out of the cockpit. And I wonder if that's why he did this next one. But there was one point where he was passed by the Cadillac of Sergio Perez, no less. And Alonso took both hands out of the cockpit and waved him bye-bye as he went past. I don't think that Alonso was expecting to be genuinely passed down the straight by a Cadillac this season, and even less so being unable to hold a steering wheel for more than 20 laps before having to retire the car, as far as we know, just because it was destroying his hands. Really sad to see one of the great drivers of all time unlucky once again. When you consider that team has so much money, that team has Adrian Newey, that team has Fernando Alonso. What's going on? It's such a shame.
And yeah, just finally to wrap this one up, we'll have our a further chat about the regs. It's not surprising to figure out, or it's not hard to figure out which side of the argument that Alonso is currently falling on. He called it the Battery World Championships, I believe. But I mean, it's clear from the split of who's saying they like these regulations and who don't. We've got the Mercedes drivers are a big fan, and the Ferrari drivers, and then on the other side you've got Max, Fernando, and Lando.
Lando.
Three world champions in their own right. Saying that they don't like it, and obviously they're all struggling to varying degrees. But where do you fall on it? I think if I was going to say one thing that I thought, watching this one, it's just to echo what you said a moment ago, really, that some of the overtakes were absolutely brilliant, like overtaking around the outside of those sweeping corners, and one thing that these regulations clearly help are being able to cling to the back of the car in front. And I think in that regard, that's completely fair racing, and that's what these regulations seem to always be trying to achieve. On the other hand, there are times when it's literally just a car, you're going down the straight or the entry to a corner, and it looks to the naked eye like one of the cars is going twice as fast as the other one. And it's just because of that battery deployment. We did see the graphics a little bit again in this race, but it's still just those overtakes really don't feel like much racing really at the minute.
Yeah, they need to sort where I kind of fall pretty in the middle of these, because from Max, Fernando and Lando's point of view, all they're seeing is that they're seeing their own car run out of battery at the start or down the straights, and they're seeing cars just drive past them, and they'll be maybe a second ahead halfway down the straight, and then by the end of the straight, the other car is a second ahead. And that's not racing. And they'll be going, well, this is ridiculous. Why are we in this situation? Whether or not they've seen the Ferrari battle, I don't know. Because obviously, if you're Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc going side by side for half a lap, every lap for the first 20 laps, you're going to go, wow, this is amazing. This is fantastic. And it helps that it's a battle for the podium rather than a battle for 10th place. If they can find a way to get a situation where there isn't such a discrepancy in battery recharging and deployment, where it's just a case of, and qualifying is the huge thing as well. And I think it's worth saying that these drivers, Max, Fernando and Lando, probably aren't just talking about the race. They will be talking about the race, but also the fact that in qualifying, Piastri made an incredible point that really kind of put the issue into perspective. He said that he was finding his rhythm throughout qualifying, possibly sprint qualifying, and he was gaining confidence, and he was taking more speed into corners, and he was gaining time through the corners, and in doing so was getting slower because he was braking later, taking more risks through the corners. His overall lap time gave him less regeneration and therefore less energy on the straights. So he actually found that he found confidence, lost time, and so backed off and got quicker. That's not Formula One. In qualifying, we need to see driver talent shine to the fore, not, if I lift off here and go a bit slower, then I'll be quicker down the straights. That's ridiculous. We have to get rid of that. That has to be solved. They also need to iron out the drive-by passes on the straight, which are made even more ridiculous by the fact that on the next straight, that car can run out, and then that car gets back past. It's like a yo-yo effect, which is ridiculous. That was worse in Australia, and I think China showed that it's going to depend on the track characteristics, and China's was better than Australia's. there is work to be done, but for all of those negatives, and there are negatives and we can't dispel them, we also have to look at the really good stuff, which is that in some situations, cars are being got side by side into corners, and that's where great racing happens. And we saw that with the Ferraris. We saw that with several battles up and down the field. So there is huge potential in this regulation set, and if they can iron out a few quirks, it could work.
Yeah, I think with the starts as well, they've been really exciting, but clearly, as George Russell said after last weekend, it's not just that some teams are way better at starting than others. It's the fact that, the amount of battery that you have on that starting line is clearly massively affecting the start you can get. And actually, the gained lost graphic popped up after 2 laps of this one,
which is better.
There was nobody. As in, sorry, not the battery, as in the places that they show.
I see.
Place,
on the
place.
I see. Yeah.
And there was nobody out in that race who was in the position that they started in,
which is great because that does the opposite. Could be the truth this time last year. So that's exactly what we need to see, and it makes it interesting. Obviously, the difference in the ability of the cars to pull off the line is huge, and we see that Ferrari, the shining example, but it's happening all up and down the grid. So that's really good. So there are positives, and it's certainly interesting. It's certainly a spectacle, and it certainly keeps you gripped. And I think it's important to, even though Liberty have definitely gone for entertainment, it's still a sport, and the driver needs to be able to make a difference, not in terms of how he manages an engine or a battery, but in how he pushes a Formula One car to the limit. And I think we just can't lose sight of that.
Yeah, I think, there's a reason why the 100-metre sprint gets a bigger audience than the marathon in the Olympics. I think, obviously, it's about 0.5% of the length would probably help. But, you see the point. I think we like sport because we like to see people test their limits and see how hard they can push themselves. And, it's not about battling within yourself or just, pressing a button and flying past. We actually got, the Mario Kart buzzer needs to be dinged, ding, 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 because Max Verstappen said it. Did you see that?
He did say it.
He said it's like Mario Kart, which we said it first. But,
we beat him to that one.
It's nice to have the Max Verstappen co-star on that one. All in all, an interesting weekend. Another Mercedes win, but not for the person we thought. And 2 races in, we've got the maximum amount of possible different winners, and hopefully
true.
That will continue into the Japanese Grand Prix, which is 29th of March. What do you make of that one? What do you think we're going to see?
Well, first of all, it's going to make me sad because the Japanese Grand Prix is where last year Max Verstappen pulled out one of probably the greatest pole laps of all time, and that was right at the start of the season when the McLarens were just so far clear, and he got pole and held them off during the race, and it was one of his great drives. And I don't think even his brilliance is going to do much in this Red Bull. And the thing is as well, that Oscar Piastri thing's thrown me a bit, because it's made me think, if he does a great lap and pushes hard and does like a great, Max Verstappen performance, or even Charles Leclerc, who's also a great qualifier, those two are probably the best qualifiers on the grid, they might lose time. So it's just kind of hard to... But anyway, the Japanese Grand Prix is going to be very interesting. It's the scene of Alonso's famous GP2 engine comment, where he tactically definitely waited until Honda's home race to say this feels like a GP2 engine, and apparently he said it multiple times throughout the race, so it definitely got broadcast and caused maximum pain. Usually it's a bit of a power track in the terms of your full throttle for quite a lot of the lap, but there aren't many particularly long straights. So I'm intrigued to see what that means for deployment. There's not many slow corners. It's a lot of medium speed corners. It's one of the great tracks for I've just had a thought. It's one of the great tracks for driving. All the drivers say that Spa, Silverstone, they're the best 3 tracks, and Brazil are the best 4 tracks. And they usually go with Suzuka, Japanese Grand Prix, as their number 1 for pure driving pleasure, because it's just flat out high speed, medium speed corners, great fun to drive. And it'll be really interesting to see what the drivers say about that, and whether their enjoyment of it is diminished by these new cars and not pushing. But yeah, there's not many long straights, and I don't think it'll be, certainly not as bad as Australia, but maybe not as good as China in terms of battery replenishment. I'm not sure. It could go either way. But I think that it'll be a track that, if Ferrari do get through, they should have a better chance of holding on because it's harder to pass there.
Interesting. It's the next thing we're going to be bringing you, as far as I'm aware. Obviously, we haven't really touched on the fact that the two Middle Eastern
have been cancelled,
which is a real shame, but it's probably a sensible decision.
The correct decision, I would say.
Given the circumstances and how soon, plans would have to have been set in motion for people to get their stuff over there. So it's a good decision, but it just means from our perspective that there's a big, long gap in the summer, not even in the summer, in the middle of the season now. So we might have a little think about whether we can bring you any other content in that gap. But for now, we'll say goodbye until early April, when we'll bring you our reaction to this next Japanese Grand Prix. Thank you for listening, and well done, Johnny. You were worried about today, but I think you've done very well, actually.
Yeah, I've got through it. And you know what I'm thinking now? I might actually try and stay awake.
Wow, it's given him a new lease of life, this podcast.
I've been given a jolt of energy.
You should. It's a glorious day.
Such a nice day. It would be such a shame to go to bed. I'm going to try and stay awake. I'm going to try and battle through.
Well, fair play, Johnny. I wish you all the best. I've got to go to work, so
I wish you all the best.
I will be staring. We've got nice big windows at work, but that just means I'll just be looking at the day that I'm not in and wishing I was in it. But hey ho, one day I'll be a full-time podcaster, probably. Maybe not.
100%. No, 100%.
So we'll look forward to those days, and I'll be stuck indoors on those days as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not
looking
really
at the
sure
window
what
and seeing
about.
the day.
Yeah, exactly. But either way, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be with you in a couple of weeks. And just have a lovely early spring. And yeah, goodbye. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye now.